Welcome to the David Spisak Show. I am so delighted to have you with me, and I believe this is going to be perfectly timed because, as anybody in retail automotive knows, and frankly, I think most of the country has heard, CDK, the largest data management system used by dealerships across the country, in fact, to the tune of 15,000 dealerships across the country. Now, this includes franchise retail automotive dealers as well as other folks like maybe independents and others, maybe outside of the auto industry specifically. But they have a huge segment of the overall dealership population. And so consequently, the fact that they've experienced this attack, and it turned out that it's a ransom attack. It started on the 19th of June. It has had a huge effect. Recently, in fact, an article came out yesterday that estimated that the damage or the cost overall to dealerships across the country, what they will lose will be somewhere between $600 million and it could be north of $1 billion. And that doesn't include every single layer that's involved here. But the reason I know that you're going to be really, really glad that you joined today is because I am actually joined by Justin Shanken, who is the founder and CEO of Black Breach. Now, what is Black Breach and what do they do? Black Breach is a cybersecurity organization that provides their services specifically to retail automotive dealers. And all of a sudden, that's something everybody is interested in, everybody cares about and wants to know about. So I'm delighted to have you here, Justin. Thank you for taking the time to join me.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it, David. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you. And I'm really honored to have you here and to have this conversation. So, Justin, start with this. So for people not familiar with you, not familiar with Black Breach, or not even really completely familiar with what exactly is cybersecurity, what does an organization like yours do, could you give us, please, a little bit on your background as well as a little more information on Black Breach?
Sure. Easy stuff. So myself, I used to be a counterintelligence special agent. So that's a mouthful, but I did it in the Army. Before I ended up doing it at the agency level in the Army, I was a counterintelligence special agent. And essentially what we do is we look for bad guys trying to get things they shouldn't be getting. All right. And that eventually spins into cyber. So what had happened in my career was I was with the Expeditionary Force into Operation Iraqi Freedom. We were the first folks in, and we've done many different really great things I'm super proud of. Excuse me. But as time went on, I ended up working at the agency level, and I was in charge of protecting DoD assets, classified assets, throughout the Southeast. And so that was everything from UAVs to the big, Northrop Grumman's, Boeing's, those types, to academia, to mom and pops. And so that essentially turned into nobody was stuffing stuff down their pants much anymore. It turns into cyber, right? And so as time went on, they took knuckle draggers like myself and said, hey, we need you to be sharper in this. And so I spent quite a bit of time honing my cybersecurity skills, which led me to start Black Breach. And
and when did Black Breach officially start as an organization?
It's about 9 years ago. We've been around
quite a while.
And so we've been a while and been around for a while. We were originally Shanken Secure and then evolved into Black Breach just as through maturity. We were brought into dealerships through NADA and through some Mercedes-Benz automotive dealers. And when we started to work with them, it was during the time about 2 years ago when FTC was raising its head. Now, I know for about 3 years they were kicking the can, but this is right when things were starting to cement and it was becoming a compliance need. And so when we were brought into the space, we were asked a couple things. One, can you provide some type of service to help us or at least discuss this, right? And two, can you make it all encompassing? So we don't have to worry about, this is not what we do. We sell cars. So we've been very fortunate to work with a lot of automotive dealers and vendors. And since this now CDK breach, it's just bringing this up to a head. So the dealership and automotive industry is really going through a cultural change, understanding these concepts and just very quickly. And I think the CDK breach really has sparked that as well.
It reminds me of the statement, you hear seemingly more and more these days being applied, but it's never a problem until it's a problem, right? And it's funny, I go to NADA every year. I have for years, and I know that you were a speaker at NADA, and for really good reason, because this is getting to be paramount, and thanks to unfortunately what occurred here, it's top of mind, but it's never a problem until it's a problem. Typically at NADA, dealers are much more prone, dealers and their managers, to be looking for solutions that will help them sell more cars, find more cars, do better marketing, reach out to people more effectively, find some new form of advertising. Everything seems to be on the above the line variable side. Bring more people in, sell more cars, drive more service and parts. There doesn't ever seem to be lines of people at the booth that happens to be some form of a utility, right? Some form of a non-revenue producing type of a solution. And you're one of those. But something tells me that you may need a bigger booth at the next NADA, because I suspect that dealers, managers, and people that work with dealerships have learned more about cybersecurity, compliance, certifications, and such, even technology architecture, development architecture, in 10 days than they probably learned in 10 years. It just so happens you've been around for nearly 10 years. Please share with everybody, how have things changed, honestly, from the first year that you were in business with Shanken Security, which, boy, that rolls right off the tongue. Black Breach is a pretty hot name.
I got rid of it better. There's a reason why I got rid of it.
But from the time Shanken started out to now, what have you seen as really big shifts or changes?
Well, it really depends on the industry. So if we're talking about in the automotive,
talk auto.
Yeah, let's talk auto. That's what we're here for. It's been a cultural change. So first is education, like you said, right? With any type of cultural challenge of learning this, it's education. But I would say that education is constantly surrounded by cost, right? Like anything, they go, hey, what's the cost? So one of the approaches that we've tried to do is try to look at this as going, well, hey, can we supplement, kind of rob Peter to pay Paul? So there are certain things, and what we've actually noticed, ironically, between saving on cybersecurity insurance to maybe some tools that you have that you don't need, some of those costs are not as great as you think, let alone are we even thinking of our time that we're spending trying to do this. But it is always a conversation, if I'm being honest. And now getting to where we are, I will say there are still some misnomers. It is also it's been very compliance driven with the FTC piece, and for good sense. I understand that. It's compliance. That's what we're doing. But I'll give you a great example. The word continuous monitoring, or that phrase, it says in the FTC to have continuous monitoring, but we've noticed dealership after dealership that ends up coming on, or we've spoke to, or we may have had a debate with, of saying, well, we pay for this service, this tool, and it's a software that runs all the time. So it's continuous. We're continuously monitoring. And unfortunately, you chuckle, but this can get heated from some time, right? That your insurance, your cybersecurity insurance, in this field in cybersecurity, that is not what that's considered, nor in the FTC for the safeguards piece. And so, continuous monitoring would be something like a security operations center, a SOC, 24/7, eyes on, looking at your tools and making sure you're protected. So things like that, there's been a continuous of just these terms that can be taken certain ways, and frankly can set ourselves up for failure if we're not careful.
So, Justin, I'm gonna interject here, because you just brought up something for anybody listening. If you're in a dealership, frankly, if you're not in a dealership, but if you own a business, chances are you need to have cyber insurance. If you don't, you really need to look into it. Now, What determines whether you need cyber insurance? Well, for starters, if you value, if it's important to have business disruption insurance, maybe that's part of it. But another part might be if you're touching NPPI, non-public-private information, customers' names, driver's license, social security numbers, addresses, zip codes, any one of those things is considered private. And not meant for the public, and it's supposed to be secured. So here's why what Justin just shared is important. You think you have monitoring, you check the box, so to speak, and then something like this occurs. There's a ransom attack. And whether that's in your own store or whether it's something like what we're seeing, unfortunately, at CDK, that either way, you're going to contact whoever is your broker for that, maybe you're using Travelers Insurance or somebody else, and you're going to make a claim. And you're going to believe that based on your understanding of your policy, that you're going to have rights to make a claim and you're going to get your money. And I'm telling you, based on what Justin just said, and I can verify this with dealers that I work with who have reached out to me, is there's a lot of claims that are not going to get paid, or they're going to be a fraction of what their expectation is. I recently, Justin, had a dealer had about $20 million in coverage, and you know what they're going to end up getting? $100,000. That's it. Because of a couple things. Number one, please understand, everybody, and Justin, you verify this for me. Business interruption insurance, yeah, you have it there, but their claims people, their job, partially, is to make certain that everything was done precisely as required. Otherwise, they're not paying that claim. Is that a fair statement, Justin?
Absolutely. In fact, we've been brought in from time to time to verify these things. They usually have their own vendors. When you go to make a claim and you may pencil whip, for lack of a better term, because they're going to ask the same things. Continuous monitoring, are you providing MDR solutions? Are you, getting these levels of protection? If you don't understand what those acronyms are now, scratching them off as a yes on that they'll allow to obviously take your money and you pay your premiums. But when a time comes to make a claim, like you're saying, unfortunately, if we say, no, unfortunately, you don't have these things, they go, well, you didn't need it. And we're not paying out, or a fraction, or we'll meet you in the middle. But it's become more and more frustrating to a lot of our clients that we've seen. Usually they bring us on for that because we actually fill out their forms for them. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we do, because they can be confusing. They can be. Yeah.
And it's incumbent on the client, the insured, to make sure they understand and they implement and they execute. That's not up to the insurance company. So it doesn't work to say, oh my God, I misunderstood. Or, oh my God, my agent didn't tell me. Oh my God, I thought monitoring meant this. All right, that's good. What a great lesson you just learned, but I cannot approve your $250,000 claim. So great point. Let me ask you this. With respect, let's jump into the CDK outage, because you have become, quite possibly, I'm sure, one of the most popular guys on the block and most popular companies, right? And I suspect that while some of this will fade, it oftentimes does until it's the biggest thing until the next biggest thing comes along. But I suspect that your company is going to see a marked increase as a result of this. So let's talk about this outage. It was something that, honestly, nobody, I don't believe in the industry, myself included, ever thought could happen at this magnitude, right? So you always hear, last year I believe there was 3,200 reported data breaches, a 78% increase over the year before, $1.1 billion in ransom paid. And before you and I started this, the interview, you happened to mention something that I thought was not oftentimes brought up, and that people need to understand the business side of this, and that, it's obviously this is criminal activity, maybe even terrorist type of activity. I would think so, but this is a business, and it's a business that pays very, very well. So yes. First of all, why do you suspect CDK was targeted, and what should we learn from that when you're thinking about things from the just from the respect of your own dealership organization or your own technology company, if you happen to work with dealerships? Why were they targeted? What do you think?
Very powerful question. So let me say this before I get going. I don't have any inside knowledge on CDK, right? That's become very legal at this
point.
Nor do I. We've heard things. Everyone's heard things. So I just want to say that. So why they were specifically targeted, I have my own suspicions and guesses. But better yet, not really why they were targeted, but why has this taken so long and been so detrimental? Okay. So I want to kind of cue on something, David, you said a minute ago that was perfect. Ransomware is a business, and these organizations, no matter what country they're in, operate like a business. And frankly, they make a lot of money. And one term that we're very familiar with from the agency side of the house, from my past life, that hasn't really made it around much, so I'm trying to say it, is this concept called ransomware as a service. Mm-hmm. What that means, we've heard this term before. We sell, our company sells penetration testing as a service, right? As a service, everything as a service. But just to realize how big a business this is, there are entities that are trying to put ransomware on as many doorknobs as they can pull. And their job is to then sell that to other criminal entities that can utilize that opportunity. So keep in mind that. Yes, sir. So
this is big. So I want you, as you're moving forward here, to touch on this, because this is something that's, holy cow, it's frightening. So what Justin just said is when you talk about ransom as a service, there's a term called SaaS, software as a service, so ransom as a service. So what they're doing, as he said, if I'm hearing you right, they essentially can breach a system, gain access, probably down to the admin level, go where they need to go, and then plant malware. That malware may exist in that business's platform for days, weeks, or months before it's activated. They then have the potential,
and in the backups.
And the backups. They then have the potential to essentially go shop that ransom opportunity, as crazy as that sounds. They're shopping that ransom opportunity to organizations maybe like Black Suit, and Black Suit says, I got it, I'll take it, like an Uber driver. And so they take that opportunity, they pay the initial organization that made the breach, and then these guys go in and they take it from there to activate the ransom attack portion of it, which typically means locking up the system and also locking up the data. Two different things, not one. So can you expand on that? Is that exactly what you're saying?
Yes, essentially, but I want to expand on a geopolitical scale just for a moment. I know
this can't be good.
But when you have something like Black Suit that may be in Russia or Eastern European, and we hear about what's going on in Ukraine, we hear about what's happening in the world, but I don't think, especially in America, and we are in somewhat of a bubble, we understand how it affects us day to day. So let's bring this all home. If I'm selling ransomware as a service, and let's say I have a group of folks that are good at hacking, but they don't want to deal with the banking. They don't want to deal with the logistics. They don't want to get on the target of the FBI's. They want to just kind of sell this information. Well, there are nation state actors. We all know the Russia, the China, the North Koreas out there that may shop and look for, and Putin called for not that long ago, what he called a Russian unity. And what he meant by that was, from the criminal side, if you find something against Ukraine, a NATO ally, an ally to Ukraine, which includes America, we may buy this and you're okay in our book as long as you give us first dibs, right? You give us a first chance at it and take a look. And then if it's something as large as maybe a CDK situation, I don't know if that's what happened there, but they can cripple their allies. It may not be about money at that point. They may not even care about the ransom. They just want to cripple folks with those opportunities. So it's not just the cyber criminals reselling in the dark web, and it's basically a marketplace for this. When you get into the geopolitical space, it can become very political. And what's very scary is if your company is held under a ransom for a bad guy that doesn't want the money. They just want to hold you hostage to cripple the economy. So that's what's happening.
This is big. This is big what you're saying, because the first thing you think of if customer data has been breached is that, obviously we're going to take that data and put it out in the dark web, sell it, right? And they could sell it and resell it and resell it. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Then you have these people that are breaching systems, and they have a business and they're making money by creating opportunities for ransom attacks. And then you've got the ransom attack side, but then you, according to you, also have the geopolitical side, which then you're getting into nations, you're getting into countries. And what you're saying now, and I'll circle back to, hey, why were they targeted? It may not be, in fact, because they were motivated by money. Based on what you're saying, they are motivated simply because they want to shut something down. Now, keep in mind, everybody listening, this has happened to Bank of America. This has happened to the government. This has happened to American Airlines, where they got basically shut down for a period of time. I was saying a number of years ago, God knows how many, that I believe that World War III will not involve soldiers. It will not involve people on the ground. It may not even involve a nuclear weapon. It may involve some type of activity like this, which cripples an energy system, cripples a financial system, cripples an economy. So when you think about, the likelihood of somebody being targeted, of course, CDK, when you do roughly $1.5 billion or more of annual revenue, you got to be seen as a pretty big financial target who has an awful lot at stake to get back online because of the money that it can cost them. I believe roughly, I'm guessing, I don't have inside information, but based on my estimation of just my experience with DMS systems, one could probably assert a number of around $125 million a month, just in terms of service fees alone. And that's just to dealers, not including fees they may get from vendors and integrations and OEMs or anything else. So it's a lot of money to be offline. So with that in mind, you're working with dealerships, Justin. We've heard about a number of dealers last year. Finley was one of them in Vegas that got hit. There was, I think, all told, the dealers last year paid, goodness sakes, I'm trying to remember what that number was, somewhere around $750,000 perhaps. But should dealers at large, dealers that you work with, or especially dealers you don't work with, should they be concerned, even though they're probably not part of that geopolitical space in terms of targeting, but should they be concerned just because of the size of their business or what's at stake?
Yes, is the answer to this. But at what levels? I try not to get everyone fear-mongering, right? I try not to that, but there are things that we sensationalism. Yeah, I don't either. I'm not that type of person. We need to see a target. We need to assess the target, and then we need to remove the target, right? We need to have this full circle. So I want to be fair with this. But there is certain threats that we do need to discuss there and risks that are associated with that with dealers. One of those is post-CDK. So we talked about quite a bit with the ransomware, and we talked about, the nation states and the business of it. But there's one business element we didn't discuss, unfortunately. Traditionally, and just this does make sense in some capacity, you're dealing with a cyber criminal. They're criminals. So even if you pay a ransom, right? Surprise, right? Big surprise.
Well, I laugh because I'm just dumbfounded by how many times when we have this conversation, or I have conversations with people, but they go, yeah, but they're not normal criminals. You don't need to worry. They're not going to hurt you. They're not going to hurt the data. They're not going to do anything. These are professional, high integrity criminals. Golly, it's crazy. Over 50% of the time, people don't, I think it's 8% of the time they don't get the data back. Over 60% of the time during restoration, they get reinfected. These are criminals, plain and simple.
I've got one to add to that. So yes, many times they do add a back door, and I'll tell you why. If it was ransomware as a service, the new entity that bought it wants its own back door into it, okay? The second thing that's very scary is the dark web. They're going to still sell that information. I'm worried about that in the post CDK apocalypse.
Do you believe, first of all, do you believe that in all likelihood that they accessed customer data, and B, that if a ransom payment was made, which CDK has not stated that they paid a ransom. Nobody knows whether they essentially rebuilt their system, their database, or whether they paid the ransom. Hard to believe it would be the former. But do you believe, number one, that they accessed customer data? And if so, regardless of whether it was rebuilt or a ransom was paid, do you believe that that information still may end up on the dark web?
I do. So my understanding with these DMS systems is that there is a lot of PII involved. There's a lot of customer information. You know, it's basically a choke point, so to speak, for so much of this. And the dealers manage that information, but it's basically being funneled into these DMSs to manage at a higher level and then compartmentalize. And so that becomes a valuable target. And when you sell that information, they sell everything from credit card to names. I mean, it's a marketplace. So the more data, the more information, the more money. And remember, again, this is a business. So if I can get paid twice on the same heist, I'm going to, right? There's no honor amongst thieves. Mm-hmm. Or maybe give up X amount of that information, just depending. Maybe there's shopping it around and selling it. The other liability I wanted to discuss in the aftermath is lawsuits. So we all hate to talk about the legal, but I've heard over and over and over again about the FTC and when FTC comes in and what's the fine for that? And let's put that in the corner for a minute. Let's talk about law firms that are doing these class action suits. Now, I had predicted this was going to happen. And frankly, it's not a crazy prediction, but it has already happened in dealerships where now the FTC ruling is if you are compromised, you have to self-report. And it does make sense, right? This is in HIPAA and other industries. But what we're seeing is, and you've seen these commercials of, hey, did you take this drug and did this drug affect you? Join our class action. Were you stationed military and you were a victim of blank class action? What we're seeing now that's very dangerous or easier, which for liability and exposure to dealerships is a law firm can go to the dark web, buy a series of breach. The last one I saw was like 51,000 names. And now they have a cheat sheet. They just go down that list and call those victims. And most of them, now we all know that they may get $12 or something while the attorneys get, X amount of million. But at the end of the day, the dealer will pay the price. And I already saw the articles that this has already happened with CDK, that quote unquote, the lawsuits are flying. Now, I'll be curious to see how that comes out. But without the right partner in this space to help out, there is a lot of liability here. It is not just the days of going, my head's under, in the ground. It won't happen to me. It's coming up where they're going to tag you, whether at the FTC, whether at a cyber criminal, whether at a lawsuit. There's just so many, or whether at a powerful vendor. And so the space has changed quite a bit very quickly.
Well, man, I think this is another huge piece. And it's a reminder or illustration of the almost unimaginable tentacles that this thing has, the legs this has, and the fact that this will in all likelihood take years before, everything is dealt with in one way or another. To what resolution, I don't know. But, the thing that I think is one thing I find that's interesting is when you talk about lawsuits, and there are likely to be plenty of those lawsuits because, the dealers, I believe in CDK's language in their agreement, dealers cannot sue CDK or recover lost income based on technology related issues. CDK, I believe, is limited to only having to pay essentially the equivalent of 1 month of billing. Now, that in of itself, by the way, Justin, is could be very substantial. If the average dealer is paying around $7,500 a month, like I said, that could amount to $115, $120 million or more just from that alone. However, dealers could essentially potentially sue for breach of contract if they want to get out of their contract. Dealers, local vendors. There was a body shop that already initiated a lawsuit. It seems ridiculous. It sounds like something that, I don't know, may end up being thrown out of court. But anybody who was affected financially, I don't know whether you think it's reasonable or not. I think many times it's not necessarily reasonable. But if somebody was affected financially, it is reasonable in their minds to recover what they lost. So that could be the external detail person. That could be your collision center. It could be the dent wizard. It also could be customers of the dealership that are not certain that their data was breached. It could be associates who lost income in the last 2 weeks, technicians, advisors, salespeople, finance managers who cannot recover that income. Some dealers I've spoken to are off by 30 to 50%. Others are having actually a fairly normal month, but there's a big bandwidth there. What about insurance companies that did have to pay disruption claims? They could possibly go over. So then you got OEMs potentially. Who knows? I don't know how far this goes, but I do know that.
David, the lawsuit article I just read was actually customers.
Yes.
People that said, so it's funny.
It's going to be more than one of them list, too.
But yes, it's probably all of us at some point that have sold. I don't know how new the data is and how far back it goes, but the class action I read was actually customers and customer data. Now, obviously, you'd have to prove that your data was part of this somehow. And depending if it does not get leaked, it may be difficult for an attorney to prove. Let's say
I don't know, Justin. I think the worst possible outcome, honestly, I'd be concerned if I was at CDK about a one single word discovery, right? Legal discovery. Yeah. So if any one of these lawsuits having to do specifically with customer data or anything else for that matter, if it results in being able to go forward with a due diligence process that includes depositions and especially discovery, what discovery means, obviously, to everybody listening, is I have the ability to do an investigation, to do an analysis. And if that has to do with the IT side, and if I happen to find somehow, some way that I can establish culpability, that I can establish negligence, oh man, that's the word. If you have negligence,
you just hit the nail on the head.
Because these cyber insurance policies, for example, you get paid X amount of dollars for one thing, but if there's negligence, ding, 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 that's a whole different level. If you're going after somebody in a class action suit and there's negligence, ding, 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 now that's a whole different level. So I think that's absolutely from their perspective, I think it's frightening to be thinking about that.
I would like to make one little point on the negligence piece to the dealers. Let's move away from CDK for just a moment. For the dealers out there that are taking this on themselves, their own cybersecurity, whether through their IT, just trying to tackle this, and it's a challenge. If you are sued and it gets to court, that's going to be the word, negligence. They're going to turn around and go, well, I filled it out myself. And I check kind of like the cyber insurance piece. Remember, we said that, right? And they're going to say, well, who are you? And you go, well, I'm the GM or the controller or this. And they go, well, are you the expert to be doing this? Versus saying, I do want to say this. There's a term in cybersecurity or in all this called an O-day, a 0 day. And this can happen to a Google, a Microsoft, that there are things we just haven't seen yet. Anyone can be hit. There is a challenge out there of that. However, with that aside, the best defense is usually I hired experts. I did the most that I could. What more? Something happened and the incidents do happen. What more? There's no negligence. We did everything responsible. And that is the saving grace.
Yeah, it's beyond reasonable control, right? So, so you're 100% right. And I think it's frightening because I couldn't pinpoint what the percentage of dealers that have even a certified, legitimate IT professional. I'm not saying they're bad people, but there's a difference between having an IT person on staff and somebody who is an IT professional. In other words, they've really gone to school, right, for this, and they have certain levels of certifications or experience or expertise that's validated, by an external source. So that's one thing. Do they have a cybersecurity outfit that is involved, that they're working with? Do they have a compliance organization that has expertise, that is conducting regular tests? Do they have somebody who's doing penetration testing, vulnerability testing? Are they checking access to see if an associate that you let go of 3 months ago still has login access? It could be something like that. I go into stores all the time, and I will tell you, I would say easily to the 90th, 95th percentile of any store or dealership I go into, I've been in the last year. This is after, to your point, 2 years ago, FTC saying, hey, guess what? Stricter compliance is coming. And then they pushed it off, and finally it was fully implemented just last month. I could go in those stores. I was in a store recently. I walked right into the F&I office. You can't do that. They're supposed to be locked all the time. I've been in stores to where I could walk into not one, not two, multiple offices, and their screensaver's not on. It's not locked down. Give me a jump drive in 10 minutes. What can happen, Justin? A jump drive in 10 minutes.
Now you're talking about my old life. That was something constantly dealing with, whether it's from an insider threat perspective, right?
And that's something to be concerned about. Disgruntled employee
at the wrong time. So it is.
So tell people what can happen,
and that's my past life. That's what countered.
So what can happen if your dealership is not locked down? You haven't mandated. Here's another thing, dealers. You have not mandated passwords to be updated. There are dealers that employees have been there for 8 years. They've never had a different password. You keep in mind, the average dealer may have 10, 12, 15 third-party solutions where there's access. There's rarely single sign-on in place. So what does this mean to a dealer? What should, at this point, as we work through the aftermath, and let's just be honest, let's be reasonable. Right now, if you're one of the affected dealers, CDK is likely doing everything in their power. This is not something they wanted. It's certainly not something they needed, and it's going to be a hurt for a long time. So they're certainly doing everything in their power to get their clients back up and running. If you're a client, you're just knee deep in trying to figure out how to survive and get through this particular chapter, unforeseen chapter of your business. But once we get past this, what are some of the things that dealers should be doing?
Yes. So I want to say something on this, because we think of that there's no way to defend ourselves. And that's just frankly not true, right? The truth of it is, though, the way to defend yourself is prior to an incident. We have a ransomware warranty. It does exist. Tools, we can have a warranty against ransomware. Now, there's fine print in it, right? We have to all be doing the same things and doing what we need you to do. However, those things do exist. I think these attacks have become so prevalent, whether it through, what was it, Target, Equifax, now CDK. There's just so many that have happened.
Yeah.
Home Depot, that we think there's no way to defend against this. And frankly, it's not true. It's all about getting before the attack. Now, there are many layers to a security stack, and I think any good IT element will say this, but you had mentioned this earlier, and I'd like to highlight it. There is a difference between IT security and cybersecurity. And so, and that is not to knock, they're equally important. I don't want to say one is more than the other, but I will say they have different lanes. So when you talk about the password, you're talking about changing passwords for never done that. Well, that's an IT security element, firewalls, multi-factor, keeping routers, keeping things going. Guys that are doing penetration tests or hacking like this, the risk assessments, running your SOC, looking at your tools, tooling. I'll give you a great example for what we're doing right now with Black Suit. We actually have a playbook for Black Suit already. And for those that don't know, a playbook is just a way to handle that specific bad actor.
That threat.
And we have playbooks for all that. Well, this is what you get with expertise, that we are looking now for those, what we call TTPs, right? And that's just a fancy term for how Black Suit acts, right? And what they're going to try to do. We are already setting up flags looking for these very specific things. We're threat hunting for these different things within our dealerships. So I just want to remove the misnomer that there's nothing we can do. This is so big and beyond us. No, we just have to get it into play first. And that's what the FTC is attempting to do in dealerships with this culture.
So I love that you said that. I heard somebody just this morning on a big broad call, and they were on the technology side, but they said, listen, they said essentially, if you've got a website, if you have a business, if you have technology, it's not a matter of if you're going to get hit with ransom, it's when. 100% are going to get hit. And I thought, what a sensationalistic, ridiculous, just insane thing to say. First of all, I think that does, warrant being characterized as fear mongering, causing panic, undue panic. Should you be prepared? Absolutely. Should we learn a lesson? Absolutely. Should we get better? Absolutely. Does that mean that we should be living in fear and operating under the belief that everybody's going to get hacked? Absolutely no way. And I was mentioning to you, and I've mentioned to so many, listen, can every house potentially get robbed? Yes. Okay. Is it more likely the guy who's never locked his door in the last 20 years is probably a bigger target than the person who's got gates, security, a dog, cameras, a monitoring system? That house, can it get robbed? Yes. Is it likely? Absolutely not. Right. So there's so many things that people can do. And the last thing you want to do is to throw your hands up. Listen to what Justin's saying. The last thing you want to do right now is throw your hands up and go, well, what can you do? It's happened to Google. It's happened to the government. It's happened to Bank of America. Ooh, I'm helpless. I guess we just need to hunker down and wait. Think about this, everybody. If somebody's willing to insure or put a warranty, what does that tell you? It tells you it's avoidable. Nobody's going to create cyber insurance knowing they're going to pay out 100% of the time. That company is not going to be around 2 weeks later. Same thing with a warranty. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but it does mean that if you take appropriate actions, you become a far less soft target, and you also become far less likely. You're like the hardest one for them to deal with. They're going to move on to that car that's unlocked with the windows down that happens to have a purse sitting in the front seat, or they're going to move on. That's a soft target. They're going to move on to a house that has no security whatsoever and happens to have a lot of computers and electronics laying in the front room. Is that fair, Justin?
Absolutely. For the analogy I said earlier, they're pulling doors. And when a door's locked, they go to the next door, and one of them's going to be open. And it is easy.
There is so much to cover here and so much more to cover that we're going to need to do a second episode. I'm going to break it here because it's a perfect place to break. But we let's go and break here because what we'll do is we're going to have a second episode. So for those listening, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time. Certainly hope and I'm confident that you learned some things from Justin that maybe you didn't know before, and things that will help you in your business or whatever you do in life, especially if you're in retail automotive, whether you're a vendor or whether you're a dealer. Second thing, Justin, I have to thank you for giving me your time, and I want to thank you in advance for making more of it so that we could talk about the rest of this, a very important story. We'll do that in part 2. And third, normally we release new episodes every Thursday because this is such an incredibly important topic and it's timely. We're going to break from that tradition. And so you're going to find that we're going to release this the very minute that we get it produced and get done. It might end up on Monday. It might end up on Tuesday. And then we're going to follow that up with the second segment of this so that we can get you all of the information that Justin can and will share with you to help you make sure that you become that locked door that they pass on to the greatest degree possible. Justin, any final parting words?
No, I just want to say thank you for your time and having us on. I think these types of chats are so powerful to help with the dealership culture and to kind of moving on a topic that's not usually fun, right? There's a lot of interesting things we can say, but it's not a fun topic. No one wants to deal with this. And the fact that you're tackling it is great. And hopefully we can, help lock some doors.
I certainly hope so. Like I said, these are always incredibly tough time. Certainly my heart goes out to everybody, all the associates at CDK, to the dealers, to their associates, obviously to customers that are finding it a little bit tougher. Man, thank you, customers, for having the patience and the grace to understand it's a little bit tougher. It takes a little more time to buy a car on pencil and paper or in a different fashion. Same thing with service. For those of everybody else working on the CDK side, to as quickly as possible get everybody restored. Obviously, everybody, including myself, appreciates those efforts, and certainly hope that that for everybody's sake, that we all can at least walk away from this with such a broader understanding, deeper understanding of what we need to do to help put ourselves in the best position possible. I promise when you listen to the second segment with Justin here, you're going to actually learn even more. And most importantly, you're going to learn the key things that you must do in the next week, 2 weeks, this next month, in order to massively improve the security on your technology and the difference between, I want you to talk more about the IT, cybersecurity, and compliance. So with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you for joining. Please take the time to share this with anybody who you know will benefit from it, which is pretty much everybody in retail. Please take the time to write a review, subscribe, and download. Justin, thanks again. Wishing you and Black Breach all the best. And frankly, thank you for what you've done over the course of this outage to really help elevate this conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, all the best. See you next time.